Good morning, one and all, and welcome to one more session on the foundation course. So, in today's session, we are dealing with the fifth module that is about enhancement of language and computer skills. Under this module, we have taken up the first one, 5A, that is related to communication in medicine. I am Dr. Swati Tikare, Professor, Department of Physiology, presenting this session for you. Communication is a very important skill. Let's begin with a quote. The most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. So, as this sums up, it's not only important in communication about what is said, but also to understand what is not said. So, let's get into this important life skill. Not only in medicine, in every aspect of our life, communication is an important life skill, which we can ill afford to not pay any attention to. So today's class is about learning to demonstrate ability to communicate with patient and families, be aware of barriers of communication and appropriate ways to respond to these barriers, how to overcome these barriers. So the objectives of our class by the end of this session, every student should be able to describe the basic elements of communication, explain the importance of good communication skills in medicine, recognize the common barriers to communication, and at the end, we will have some tips for an effective communication. So this is the agenda for today's session. Communication can be defined as a process by which people share ideas, experiences, their knowledge, and feelings through language or symbolic messages. So basically, communication is about sharing one's thoughts with the others. So we all know this. As communicators in the field of medicine, physicians form relationships with patients and their families. The requirement for this is that to facilitate the gathering and sharing of essential information for effective healthcare. So that's the purpose of communication in healthcare, to gather information, to share information, and which is all essential in the effective health care to be provided to the patients. So we will go slowly how these aspects are going on. First, let's try to understand why is the communication so very important? Why the communication role matters? First and foremost, when the communication is better, clear, it increases the accuracy of understanding each other and prevents any miscommunication. It improves the outcome of care, both in actual terms as well as in psychological terms. When the communication is good, the patient feels that the outcome is better. The heightened perceptions by patients that they are being supported by their physicians. So the patient's well-being feeling is better with the good communication. Also, it is found there is reduced rates of adverse events and medical errors, better protection against complaints and malpractice claims. You must have, in the recent past, heard of a lot of uh, cases of negligence or medical errors or something like that coming up. So it's not basically about an error. Once we have a trust which is built with the patient, and then we follow it up with good communication, and the patient understands every step, there is less chances of the patient complaining or claiming malpractice. So communication and is a very important plays a very important role in gaining the trust of the patient, and the trust of the patient is all the very important. So let's see now, how are the most common ways in which we communicate? Of course, the verbal communication, as we are doing right now, the spoken words are the most important means of communication, but the other means include, especially in the health care sector, the body language, the written word in terms of some documents or patient education material or the consent forms, so many ways, the written word, then the visual images, signboards. So all these are the ways of communication. But today, I think we are going to concentrate more about the how to empathetically communicate with the patient, specifically with our spoken words and our body language. So, for an effective verbal communicator, what is most important when we are communicating? We should see to it that whatever we are clarifying, this mnemonic, clear, is a very useful mnemonic to understand how to be an effective verbal communicator. So first, our communication should clarify things. It should be clear, clarifies things. First and foremost thing in communication is to be having good listening skills. So the person listens, and not only listens, encourages empathetically. So what do we mean by here? Encourages empathetically. So when a patient is giving out his woes or problems and all that, we encourage him by giving some leading questions, giving an assurance nod that we understand the problem and how disturbing it is, and such. When we give such kind of clues, positive clues to them, they feel more encouraged to give the information in total. The fourth one is acknowledges. Okay, so any problem that they say, and if we acknowledge, yes, it could happen, it could be so bad. So when we acknowledge it, the person gets encouraged to give his complete story. Restates or repeats. So this is very important, where whatever we hear, we repeat it and we get a confirmation from the other person. Yes, this is what he meant to say or communicate. So these are simple mnemonic. We will understand little more in detail how an effective communication should be. So all the communication is not the verbal communication. Please concentrate on the top line, which is written there on the screen. Non-verbal communication. You cannot not communicate. So what does this mean? Even when we are silent, not talking at all, still we are communicating. We cannot not communicate. There are so many other ways in which communication is happening. It's our gestures, our facial expression, our tone, our body language, and the way we look, the gaze, everything is speaking all the time. So in a study, what was found is our words, the verbal words which we are talking, they will communicate only 7% of all the information or whatever the person gathers. The words constitute only 7%. The voice, tone, modulation, the way we speak, and all that is about 38%. And the remaining body gestures are constituting about 55%. So we can see that we have often heard it's not what the person said, it was the way she said or the way he said. So it's not about the words always, it's about the way it was said, which is the main form of communication. So in the non-verbal communication, as I was telling you, we mean the all the information or signals that we are sending by our body gesture, body language, posture, tone of the voice. All this constitutes the normal non-verbal communication. We can also classify them as kinesis, that is body language, haptics, that is touch language, proxemics, space, how near or how far we stand to make that communication is also important. Chronomics, when we say something is very important as what we say. Silence, paralanguage is rephrasing and repeating and telling, sign language. So all these are non-verbal forms of communication. Let's see a little bit in detail because there is so much we are communicating even when we are not talking. So let's see little more details about it. So coming to the proxemics means at what distance we stand to make the communication. So there is a small distance of, if the person is very near, less than 1.5 feet, it means it's an intimate space of the patient. We shouldn't be so near as a health professional, as a doctor. We shouldn't be so near. So around roughly around 1.5 to 2 feet would be called as intimate space. Further, up to around 3 feet or 4 feet, we would say it is a personal space. Then beyond that is the social space, and further beyond, about beyond 6 meters, we would call it as 6 feet, we would call it as public space. So we should be appropriate. You can see the picture over here, the cartoon depicting. So it's okay here at this distance, but when you intrude into the intimate space, it is not so okay. So this is also communicating something. When you maintain that distance, when you give the respect, it shows respect when you are at a particular distance. So first is the place, then the body language as per the touch. So we have to be very careful about whenever the physical examination is going on, when we are doing it to the patient, we need to see to it that it is very respectful, it is accepted by them, they have consented, and it should not be uh, means troubling or uncomfortable to the patient whenever the examination is going on. So that is about the touch body communication. Paralanguage. Paralanguage includes everything when we are talking, except the words. Except the words, it's about the pitch in which we are talking, the tone, the volume, the rhythm, the speaking rate, the voice quality. We could be shouting, we could be calm, we could be showing a lot of care in our talk. So all this includes the paralanguage, and I'm sure you all will agree that this is very, very important, m- more important than the choice of your words, the tone in which we are speaking. So summing up, the all the things related to the non-verbal communicator, how the non-verbal uh, gesture or expression should be, it should be relaxing one. It should be one in which the person is quite opening up and relaxed pattern, leans towards the person to whom he is trying to talk, establishes eye contact, and shows appropriate facial expressions. So minimum is these things that has to be done in a, the non-verbal gestures should be. Tone of the talk should be good and appropriate. The facial expression should be appropriate. There should be an eye contact. You should not be very near or very far from the patient or the family member whom you're talking to. And it should be in a relaxed tone. So these are the non-verbal vibes that you need to give when you're talking to a patient or a patient's family. So all that is related to our patient communication would be called as interpersonal communication. So what is this interpersonal communication? It's a person-to-person two-way verbal and non-verbal interaction that includes the sharing of information and feelings between individuals, or it could be a small group including the family member also. And the purpose for this is establishing trusting relationships, which is the basis of our further uh, whatever care, health care has to be given is depending on this establishing a trusting relationship. So as I was telling you, establishing a good trusting relationships is very important in healthcare setting, and it is the key element which will maximize the quality of care. So when we are talking, when there is a communication, it involves a lot of things. It includes educating the patient sometimes, it includes motivating the person sometimes, and most of the times it includes the counseling part. So the ultimate aim of communication with the patient is, let's build bridges, not walls. So as Martin Luther King Jr. had said, communication should always build bridges and they should not be walls. So when that can happen, when our communication is soft, communication is appropriate, when we are good listeners, we are empathetic, that's when our communication will build bridges and not walls. This quote I have always told you, I think I'm repeating this. The patient will never care how much you know until they know how much you care. So, communication plays a very important role here. So, let's move on to the steps in communicating with patients. How do we actually communicate? What do we start with and how we do things? Communicating with patients, most important thing is we should keep in mind is it should not be that we are doing all the talking. Listening with empathy is part of communication continuously, whether when the person is talking or we are talking. So, listening with empathy. So, I hope you understand the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is when we are showing mercy or we are feeling pity to the patient or the person whom we are talking to. Empathy is where we understand their problems and we want to be part of their solution, or if not the solution, we are part of being listeners to their difficulties, and we give a motivation to them and support to them while we are listening. So, whenever we are in contact with the patient, and these are the steps, some 7 steps are there that we need to follow so that we develop effective communication skills. So, the first one is building a relationship. We'll go into each of them in detail. We'll just list them first. So, first is when we meet the patient, we build a relationship. Second, we open a discussion, opening the discussion. Third, gathering information. Fourth, understanding the patient's perspective. Fifth, sharing information. What we have to share, sharing information. Reaching an agreement. Lastly, providing closure for the meeting. So let's see how we go about each of these steps. Building a relationship. So in this, we begin with greeting and showing interest. Either we introduce ourselves, we know the other person, we introduce each other, then use words of concern like what brought you here to the hospital or what is your problem. So all these things. And during the starting part, when we are greeting and making a contact with them for the first time, use appropriate eye contact, tone, pace, and posture of concern. And we should not behave uh, as though we are unconcerned, or indifferent behavior should not be there. This is the first time we are meeting. It should be the uh, and we are trying to build a relationship. Second, opening the discussion, allowing the patient to complete main concerns. So we allow the patient to start talking about what brings him there or what are his concerns. All these discussions could be like in different settings. Okay, it could be in an OPD setting, that is an outpatient department, where the patient has just moved in and he is trying to tell what brought him there. That could be the point of discussion. Or it could be that the patient is admitted in the ward, and during the rounds the person is trying to raise his concern that after the previous rounds or something, what are the additional concerns he is having. And it could be there, or it could be just he has been diagnosed of some condition, some tests were over, and the patient comes back with the test diagnostic, and this is the time where the diagnosis has to be revealed and the treatment has to be given. So the setting could be different places. It could be an OPD, it could be an IPD, it could be the revealing of the diagnosis, it could be discussion of a treatment. So wherever, but everywhere we follow these steps. So allow opening the discussion, allow the patient to complete, and you can ask uh, leading questions so that you get all the information. Is there anything else? So explaining and negotiating the agenda. So at this point of time, you will decide that what is the discussion. You to take a leading role to understand what is the discussion going to be about. Now, further, we complete our information, gathering more information, beginning with patient story, open-ended. Open-ended, we ask what brings you here, what is the problem, or such open-ended questions. Then we ask specific, do you have a fever? Was it lasting for more than 2 days? So these are close-ended questions. Okay, we clarify the details. We are gathering more and more information. Then summarizing and correcting the information if necessary. Okay, sometimes uh, there may be a correction required. So the patient begins with, okay, probably it was for 2 days I did not have anything. Oh no, it was actually 3 days ago. So something like that. So correcting the information at this very early stage is important. You gather all the information that is required. You clarify any mistakes that are done is also clarified. Next, understanding the patient's perspective. Okay, so okay, the problem may be that the patient has come to your OPD and you have found that there is some concerns related to a headache and so many things. Then you examine and you find out that the patient has a hypertension. Okay, so if knowing only about the disease would not be a concern, the asking about certain life events, other perspectives are very important, like the stress involved, their jobs that is there, or any other concerns, their patients' beliefs. It the way we give the treatment or talk to them should be dependent on the patient's perspective, his culture, his values, his belief systems. Accordingly, we have to respond, not hurting their belief system. Okay, so if there are any particular concerns, we have to respond explicitly to the patient's concern. So all this is about understanding patient's perspective. So perspective is very important. He comes with a headache. You think it is a hypertension, you diagnose it as a hypertension, then you want to give a treatment. But before all that, there are certain other things which you need to know, which may be related. So this is what where you understand the patient's perspective. Sharing information. So here, till now, we were receiving all the information from the patient, trying to clarify, doing all the corrections. Here we are, after assessing the patients and understanding the condition, here there is explaining the same, whatever the doctor or the physician has understood, explaining the same with simple language. Remember not to use any jargon. Okay, not very high level medical terms should not be used. It should be in simple, the language that the person understands, and keep checking for mutual understanding. Okay, whether you're discussing the diagnosis or treatment plan. And ultimately, the last thing that you ask us, allow him to question any questions. So once you have also given the information, shared the information, we reach to an agreement. Okay, so probably we give a couple of options that this is you may try the lifestyle. Since the blood pressure is not so very high, we may try the lifestyle modifications first. You can do some yoga, you can do some exercise, you may lose your weight, and try for a few 1 month or something, or we can straight away start with the anti hypertensive drug. So you may have like this some choices, okay, which you have given to the patient. So here you reach an agreement. What is it that the patient wants to accept? Remember, the patient has his own autonomy. Patient autonomy means our job is only to explain to them what are the choices available and what is the best choice according to us. We have to allow the sub patient and his family to take the decision. So include the patient, provide choices, and reach to an agreement. Ask about patient feasibility for the same. Okay, so whatever decision has been taken, it should be feasible. Okay, it could be in terms of the financial, it could be in terms of availability, affordability, or some physiotherapy is required, some therapy you're telling, whether it is available at his place, whether he can go through that place. So these feasibility issues. So you reach an agreement here overall about the decision, what course to be taken. Last, providing closure of the meeting. So here, this is very, very important. You summarize everything, you clarify the things, you once again state that these were the choices, this is what you have chosen, and still, if you have any queries, we decide like this, when our next meeting will be. So all this you tell, and then any queries, and close the interview formally. So all these things are very, every step is important. And though it appears very routine and casual, means that's the normal way we do in anywhere. What is new means, but we should not be missing any of the points. So here the health, the care is so critical that we can't afford to miss. So if we initially start practicing this in a stepwise manner in every communication, later definitely we are not going to follow these steps. It becomes automated with us. So that's what we want, that by the end of 5.5 years of your MBBS course, all this should be automated and you should be able to do this as a habitual manner. Okay. So just we told that so much about communication, what we are talking, what he is understanding and all that. So the sender, that means the person who is speaking, is when he is speaking, when he is having a gesture, he is almost encoding the information. And through some medium, it reaches the receiver and he decodes it. So instead of decoding, it should not be miscoded or misunderstood. So that is where why it could happen. Why is it that we try to make a very clear communication, but in spite of that, the communication is not happening in the right way, but it could be a miscommunication? That's because of the presence of various barriers in communication. Let's now have a look about what are the various barriers in communication. So starting, the first barrier that could be there is the language. So the local language that is spoken by the patient or their families may not be the language that we know. So language could be a barrier. Or sometimes we know the local language, but we cannot actually simplify all these medical terms into the local language. We know the language, but the medical terms, we don't know them and we confuse them. So over a period of time, we need to, by following the role modeling, by seeing the doctors during your training, you learn how to, what language, how to use these medical terms in the local language is very important. Okay, the first barrier could be the language. Second barrier is about the values and beliefs. Okay, so values and beliefs are very much entrained in us. So we simply take for granted that what our values and beliefs are the same as the other person there, which could not be the thing. So how values and beliefs could be different means, we just think that it is normal to be going for a walk or something like that. But that same time, the person may think that no, his time to the family is more important at that point of time. They can't go out to take a walk. So I am giving just some simple examples, but there can be very many different values. Okay, some during the routine some medication has to be taken. The patient may feel that there is some particular month going on, they are fasting, and we can't tell them that this is what has to be done. So what is in the best interest, we need to definitely tell, but we definitely have to take into perspective their values and beliefs. Then gender and age is an important barrier that could happen. Gender, when we are talking to the opposite sex, what they say, the men are from Mars and women are from the different planet. So both living on the earth. So gender can come act as a barrier. Sometimes it is very uncomfortable for the physician of a different gender to communicate with the female patient, or the male physician with the female, or the female physician with the male. So that could be a barrier. Age could be a barrier. Talking to very small children and elderly people could be a different ball game totally. And we need to identify how to communicate with them. Economic status also can act as a barrier to communication, because it all sets up certain status and kind of different kind of attitudes with the varying economic as well as educational level. The patient may not be able to. Education is also a very important barrier in communication. If the patient is illiterate, they are not able to understand what we are explaining. It is a very difficult task, and it remains a very most what to say. It's a most challenging task to make the patients understand, especially in a country like India. Physical barriers. Physical barriers can happen anywhere where we are in the emergency room and there are so many other patients. There may be some accidental case. A lot of patients are there. There is stress. We we may not be simply heard. So it's a physical barrier. Or the patient is in ICU and we are trying to communicate with somebody outside. It could be a physical barrier. So attitudes, as I told you, uh, we are totally ingrained with our attitudes. It could also be a barrier, the way we are, how we are, whether we are open, whether we are calm, whether we are short tempered. So, all these are attitudes. So, it is very important for the medical professionals to gain an attitude of being relaxed, calm, approach worthy, and being empathetic, encouraging, listening, caring. So all these are attitudes which we have to develop and cannot give it up on us. Timing. Timing is also very important. We need to really gauge properly at what time, which kind of information should be given. Okay, so any breaking of bad news or something like that, or a very challenging diagnosis, a very grave diagnosis, cannot be given up just like that. So it has to be planned slowly, that we prepare them to accept what we are going to tell. So timing is very important. Suddenly, when they are very anxious, we tell something instead of though which is in our good intention, we tell it may be uh, miscommunicated rather than understanding. Okay, so so ultimately, whatever we do, whatever way of good communication we do, there may be problem in understanding the message. And the last and most important barrier is the trust or lack of trust, I would say. So when a person develops that trust in any communication, in any relationship, whether it is doctor-patient relationship, if there is trust, there is all these barriers of communication can be overcome. But if we are not able to build that trust, then any amount of communication may ultimately be wasteful. Okay, so trust is a very important thing to gain to have an effective communication. So, what is the knowledge? How can we do this? Now that we have understood, there are communication is so important in medical field. We understood there are certain barriers to communication. How is it? What skills, what knowledge is required for effective communication? Let's have a look at these things. So, what are all things that is required? First thing for a good communication is adequate knowledge of the subject. This is a must. Without this, we definitely, with half-baked knowledge, we can't do any kind of communication. And understanding, second thing, an understanding of one's own values and willingness to withhold judgment about other people's values. Okay, I think it will take time to understand all this, but we should always state we should not give any judgments about their values. We should withhold it. We should not be judging them. Skills in verbal and non-verbal communication have to be developed. Ability to show empathy and encourage others is required. Skills in asking questions and listening. Both are required. Tolerance and patience. Of course, they are the most important things. Next, coming ability to paraphrase means we can't go on repeating the same words again and again. I said you so, I said you so means this is what. But that one sentence may not be understood well. We have to reframe that and again repeat it. Just like when we are taking a class, we don't repeat the same sentences. We rephrase it and again tell it. So if one couldn't understand the first sentence, it is understood with the second sentence. So we paraphrase, summarize, and then put it. Ability to observe and interpret the behavior of the other person is also very, very important. You observe and interpret the behavior of the other person intelligently. We have been doing it in many other relationships, in our friendships, but all the more it is very important here. Ability to use language that other people understand. So, in simple terms, it means we need to use simple language. Skills to effectively use support materials. Confidence is essential, and we need to be flexible in our approach. So, so many things are there. If I have to sum up in just 4 or 5 things, what is important, what facilitates effective communication, it would be in this way. Resorting to positive attitude, first and foremost, keen and active listening, a humane approach, using appropriate verbal and non-verbal language, seeking clarification, very important, seeking clarification, acceptance and correction of miscommunication. So, in short, I would say that these are the very important aspects of having an effective communication with the patient or the patient families. So, now that we are coming to the end of the session, the take home message of this session would be that we all need to be aware about the importance of good communication. Doctor-patient communication is a special privileged communication where confidentiality and empathy are the two very important things under doctor-patient communication. Communicating with patients with empathy is very important. We need to understand what are the barriers of communication and ways to overcome the barriers. So ultimately, the message of this session on communication skills is that communication is an integral part of healthcare. It is a very important skill that we need to inculcate and get it right. We need to practice good communication so that it becomes habitual to us. We need to understand steps of good communication. We need to have empathy and understanding in our communication. We need to have a humane approach in our communication with our patients. We should able to be identify the barriers in communication and overcome them. So this is what is the ultimate aim of this particular session, to sensitize you regarding the importance of good communication. So in the new global and diverse healthcare domain, excellent communication skills are a must. So there is no way we can uh, do away with this particular skill. And the best thing to do is communication works for those who work at it. So we can't expect to be good communicators without practicing it. I hope this sums up that communication is important. It is, and if it is important, we need to learn it. And if we need to learn it, definitely we have to work on it. Thank you for attending this session on communication in medical domain. Thank you, one and all.